who's standing for reggae music. You was a conqueror, Bunny Wailer. You was a true reggae messenger, Bunny Wailer.
Good evening and welcome to another community forum. I'm your host Byron Campbell and of course our co-host Chris Diali. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Byron, and good evening to our listeners and viewers out there. We thank you again for tuning into our program, and you must agree with me, that pink shirt by Byron, speaks. It's speaking to us tonight, so we'll see how that goes for the evening.
I'm not going to comment on this, Chris. We have a full evening, and we want to start right away because we have a packed agenda this evening. Mm-hmm. We have a special guest coming on as Dr. Spencer Thomas, and he's going to be dealing with climate justice. So that's going to be really interesting. But let's go right away into our chit chat, Chris. And we have well, first of all, let me say that we want to look at the political dimension of Beryl, if we could call it this, Chris. And the company, Dunn Pierre Barrett and Company, Canada Limited, did a survey checking things out, and it's interesting. And we have with us on Zoom Dr. Pierre. Dr. Pierre, are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, good evening. And welcome. So what we're learning, Dr. Pierre, is that the management of the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl has significantly increased the favorability ratings of our Prime Minister, Honorable Dickon Mitchell. Currently, you said, is trending at 80.5%, the highest level after the June 2022 elections. And interestingly, the survey was conducted about 2,200 persons, 50% in Grenada and 50% in the diaspora, and some 65% were women and 35% men. However, persons living in the diaspora, which is interesting, on average gave the PM a higher rating than persons in Grenada. Dr. Pierre, give us what is significant about this particular poll at this time?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Pierre, and obviously I'm a Grenadian, and thank you for having me here. So we conducted the hurricane survey. We conducted the Hurricane Beryl survey, and as you mentioned, we interviewed 2,200 persons. So 50% of them were from the diaspora, and when we say the diaspora, we use persons from the United States, England, Canada, Trinidad and Tobago, Turks and Caicos, and all of that. So the largest percentage of 331 persons came from the United States. 297 came from England, 333 came from Canada, 157 in Trinidad and Tobago. We had 4 from the Turks and Caicos, and everyone else. So we came up to 1,100, and then we took the others from persons living in Grenada. So as you said, we mentioned, women. A higher percentage of women answered their survey. So what we saw, some of the data coming from their survey, well, it was very interesting in the sense that you mentioned persons in the diaspora gave the Prime Minister a higher rating. They felt that, we asked them a series of questions, how were we doing, what they, if they followed their survey, what made them, what the main contribution for their giving their Prime Minister such a high mark, and overwhelmingly people felt that that persons were very concerned. A lot of people were not prepared for the for the hurricane. Persons said that they, especially persons, generally people were not prepared. A lot of information was not given per se, and as a result, people felt that if they had more adequate information, things would have been different. So what we started to do, we asked them questions from a series from day one after the day after the survey to the 10 days after this survey. But what took the impact is that when they felt that they felt it was chaotic in a couple of days after the survey. However, persons felt when the Prime Minister sort of took things in his own hand, maybe took charge, they felt more comfortable. They were very happy in terms of the whole questions in the answer, their press releases, the way.
But why, Dr. Pierre, but why is the diaspora coming up with a higher rating overall than Grenadians? Well, let me say nationals living in Grenada.
Well, yes, but I believe that the diaspora, just my opinion, I could be wrong. Obviously, they have a rosy photo impression of things that happen in Grenada. Most of them are not really on the ground per se. There is obviously a lot of persons have very high favorability for the Prime Minister, and they always had favorability of the Prime Minister, and they also see him in limited capacity. But this was the first time they saw there was a challenge. They saw the Prime Minister, quote unquote, under stress, under a crisis, and they felt that the way that they got through, he got through that crisis, even though the crisis is still not over. They felt very satisfied and very comfortable.
Dr. Pierre, sorry, Dr. Pierre, I want to challenge two things that you said. That the diaspora had an impression of that prior to Beryl hitting Grenada, the information wasn't as it ought to be, and a few hours after Beryl, it was chaotic. We on the local scene don't share those views. Prior to Beryl hitting, we had quite a lot of information coming from NADMA and coming at quite a rapid pace because Beryl developed quite rapidly, and people were being told even before it became a warning, and it was a watch, that to go and prepare and so on. And a lot of us in the business community prepared, and as well in general home. So I don't understand why they had the impression that the information wasn't sent out timely so people could get prepared. And what has happened as well, and that is where I want to find out how the survey would have addressed that. The hurricane hit the northern part of the island chain harder than the southern part. Yes. And we believe that the Prime Minister did an excellent job in dealing with the impact, giving us assessments with power and water and all of that, and understanding the dire need in the islands. And the question is, we believe with his lack of experience in a crisis management situation as he met, he and the team at NADMA did an excellent job. Byron and I expressed that already. So my question to you is, how do you see that affecting the politics? Because the aftermath of a hurricane like that, what happens in Carriacou, what happens in Petit Martinique, and some of the Grenadine Islands, how we meet that, how we manage that, how we manage the funds, do we have the capacity to implement, is going to also speak to how he as minister has handled the crisis in the after. So is your survey looking at that 6 months, 2 years down the road in terms of how they manage?
Right, yes. So very, very good question. So when we ask persons in terms of the perception of him or the country handling the crisis, the diaspora believed and had high rating that he will step up to their plate. In fact, the majority of persons believe that he can step up to the plate, and he will. And I think that was, very impressive coming out from the survey, is that they felt that he at least came up to the plate. He had the ability to manage the stress, manage the crisis properly. So I think that they give him very high ratings for that.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Pierre, this is a very short time because we have to return to a normal program, and we really want to thank you very much for your time and appearing on us. And we're hopeful that we can have you on a longer conversation to go into a bit in depth on this particular survey. So again, we thank you very much, Doc, and all the best. Chris, thank you. Chris, CARICOM heads meeting next week, is it 28th to the 30th?
Yeah.
But what's most interesting, of course, our Prime Minister will be assuming chairmanship of CARICOM, but the agenda, I think, is interesting. Listen to the key points agenda for this meeting. Agri-food systems and the prioritizing food and nutrition security, something we've been talking about. Climate change and sustainable development, foreign policy, CARICOM single market economy. But interesting, this one, an engagement with social partners.
Well, that is normal.
Yeah.
Years ago, when I was president of the chamber and vice president of the CAIC, Caribbean Association of Chambers, I attended CARICOM meetings as a social NGO kind of group, but primarily to listen to the policies that was being framed, and for us to respond as a private sector on the positives and the negatives, or the pros and cons, if you want to put it that way. So they have always engaged with social partners. The thing with this particular is the degree of engagement. Because I remember this government have never reinstituted.
Well, that's the point I was coming to. So on the
social grouping,
we have not, our government have not so much engaged, and the social partners have been commenting on this.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about labor and business community, the church and others.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens there. Chris, we have new property valuation assessments by the Ministry of Finance. What are the implications, you think?
Well, I looked at them over the last couple of days because they sent me notices about my property as well.
Right.
The long and short of this, and I don't want to go into great detail, is that our property taxes, if this new valuation is implemented for the next cycle, which is January next year, is going to increase by 135%. So if you used to pay $100, you're going to be asked to pay $235. Right?
That's a lot, Chris. That's significant. Should I be concerned?
Yes, you should be. And if we extend that to commercial properties, it's going to be even more significant. And this is a tax that has had high compliance. We have been in the 90s, 92, 95% in terms of compliance. I suspect if this is implemented as what they plan to do with the valuation of properties, some valuation in properties jump up 200% based on the last value and what they put on now. And the question becomes for the government and the average citizen, this is a hidden tax that we're putting on, significant today. The rate have not changed, but the value.
But they're asking you, if you're in disagreement, to come in and let's talk about it.
And of course, you have to come in with reasons why you're in disagreement. Right? So it is not going to be a straightforward thing. Trinidad, I tried this years ago and they had to walk it back. Because property tax, when you increase it on valuations, is going to be significant.
Particularly with persons of fixed income, like myself.
Correct.
Retirees, yes.
And that is the challenge going forward.
Chris, Trump, the attempt assassination, what do you think? You think it was luck, divine intervention, or some other conspiracy? What do you think happened there?
Well, let me say openly, I don't support Trump politics, right? So I believe the gentleman is not, best suited for office, and people may agree, and I'm okay with that. He twists the truth in every form and fashion you could get it. So with this particular incident, you're not sure if it was created by Trump and his people or not, to get sympathy and so on, and I believe that will be a question as well. But at the end of the day, Byron, I say for a country as powerful as the U.S., here we have a convicted felon, out of 320 million people, and a guy who is probably bordering dementia. For the presidency, one of the most powerful nations in the world.
It's COVID positive now, huh?
That is Biden?
Biden, yes.
I mean, it is just, and they call us banana republics. They have no moral authority in my book. Just pronounce on any one of us and what we do in our democracies in terms of elections and so on.
Chris, comments from Carriacou. There's a lot of comments coming from Carriacou post-Beryl, and one of them is that because a lot of people have started, they want to start their building, their roofing in particular, particularly a lot of nationals overseas. You know, they're back here, they're coming in, and they're complaining that they're paying VAT and other taxes, and St. Vincent has relief VAT and taxes altogether. So what they're saying now for construction material, and what they're saying now, look, we're going north, we're going to St. Vincent and get our material because they're paying significantly more for it. So this is an easy do, I think. And although the government has talked about removal of taxes on personal items, I think building material is one that urgently should be addressed.
I did say in the previous program, one of the challenges you face after a hurricane is capacity to implement things as is needed and is prioritized. In the last time when Ivan had passed, we had a place called, I think it's ARD, I can't remember.
ARD, yes, Agency for Rural Development.
Right, and ARD came in with specialists in areas to deal with recovery with a hurricane passage, so from construction to socio-psychological issues. So the question becomes, and you have not heard that come from the government as yet, have they set up capacity or institutions to deal with the issue? We have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in, $100 million from the insurance thing. We have $2 million from USAID, $1 million or $2 million from ECCB.
And more are going to come in.
Yes, and that's not talking about the personal effects that people will come with their own money.
That's correct.
And so two things facing the government in this rebuilding challenge. The first one, the Prime Minister knows that no building is going to go back up unless they meet PPD standards. Right, the authority, PPA, and the building codes have to be in effect. In Ivan, we knew a lot of men who never know nothing about construction and how to hold a hammer suddenly became contractors.
Yes.
And that is another thing they had to guard against. Because people want to cover back, because rain still falling, they want to go back to some level of normalcy, whether it is with tarpaulins or whatever, you're going to see that happening. And some of the structures in Carriacou, when you hear the reports, were badly built. Some of them hardly had steel and they just crumbled. So it's build backs, and we're hoping it can build back better. So the question is, and you hear Carriacouans people, we could electrify Carriacou. Grenada could electrify Carriacou, but they can't connect houses because they don't have roofs, and they're not built back to the stage where they could get that. So that is even going to frustrate the people there more, in that, you know, here it is, we put up a temporary roof and we still can't get nothing, and that is the challenge the government, they're going to face challenge with boots on the ground, the capacity to institute and implement, and to coordinate this thing in a focused way. A Carriacou footprint is not large.
It's not large.
Right?
What's the population there?
I think it was 6,000, between 6,000 and 8,000. And a lot of them are boating people.
And we should say Petit Martinique. They want to be called.
Petit Martinique as well. And this is where the challenge will be. Family will come back with teams of people. And, you know.
Chris, we're going to move on because we have, of course, our guest, Dr. Spencer Thomas, will be joining us. So viewers, please stay with us. We'll be right back.
A Carnival Pulse is coming. Yes, you heard it. Carnival Pulse, a vibrant live broadcast event that captures the heart and soul of Grenada's Carnival. July 29th to August 9th at the Esplanade and Bruce Street Mall. Stay tuned for more information on Carnival Pulse, a production of MTV and Fusion FM in collaboration with Grenrill Property Corporation Limited. This carnival will be pulsating.
In our part of the world, we need to be prepared for natural disasters like storms and hurricanes, even outside of the season. I'm sure you'll agree that keeping our loved ones, homes, and businesses safe is important. So, I came up with a few quick tips to help you stay safe. Familiarize yourself with your electrical panel, as it may be necessary to switch off the power during a storm or flood. Make sure you install a transfer or isolation switch to prevent your generator feeding electricity to Grenlec's line. If trees are too close to power lines, call Grenlec at 237 for advice. By following these easy steps, you will be well on your way to being hurricane ready. Don't be caught off guard by natural disasters. Prepare now. For more information, visit grenlec.com.
Welcome back, viewers. And as we indicated earlier in the start of the program, our special guest this evening is Dr. Spencer Thomas. He is a former Director General and Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. He also served as Economic Advisor to the Minister of Finance. Dr. Thomas has over 25 years of experience in international diplomacy in the areas of climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable development. Dr. Thomas holds a doctorate in economics with focus on energy, master's and bachelor's degrees in, developmental economics and mathematical economics, respectively, and a postdoctoral master's degree in regulation and policy with a focus on telecommunications and information communication technology. So we want to take this pleasure to invite Dr. Thomas to our program. He's joining us by Zoom. Dr. Thomas, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Dr. Thomas is my good friend, and we have known each other for many years. So, you know, Doc, you're here this evening to talk to us about climate justice. And for our viewers, probably you could tell us in brief what really is climate justice.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak on this very important topic, and good evening to all our listeners out there. I think first of all I must say that climate justice is a very important topic, and I must say it is a topical topic given the impacts of climate change globally and what recently happened in Grenada with Beryl and the rest of the region quite recently. This is unprecedented. First time we have a Category 5 hurricane in July. Coming on the heels of drought, a significant drought in Grenada. And we have all these records taking place, hottest day, hottest month, hottest year, and so on going on, and all the climate impacts across the world. I must say though that climate justice has always been on the table. Let me take you back to 1988, to the Brundtland Commission on Sustainable Development, and even the definition of sustainable development, bringing in all holistic approaches, economic, social, and environmental, and also that intergenerational equity issue was part of the definition of sustainable development way back in 1988. That found its way in the debate. And of course, if you remember, the small island developing states, they have put forward a concept of loss and damage way back in 1990, even prior to the Convention on Climate Change, way back in 1990. And the concept of loss and damage takes also into consideration the issue of climate justice. Because what we're saying is here is that these countries will suffer irreversible losses. And as a result, the future generation will not have the same sort of latitude as the previous generation. And as a result, there is a loss. So there is a concern that we should have reparation for this loss. That was way back in 1990 and 1992 in the convention document.
Does climate justice, Doc, give us the ability to take these nations who are committing this atrocity, climate change, we know them, you know, the Indias, the US and so on, and all those oil producing countries. Does it give us as islands, as SIDS, that are feeling the effect, the ability to take them to court or take legal action under the climate justice umbrella?
Yeah, well, exactly, because climate justice recognizes that some countries, some communities, marginalized groups, vulnerable populations, they are at the front lines and they bear the greatest burden of the growing impacts of climate change. That is recognized. And since we have a way to say that since we are on the front line, small island developing states, at the same time, those communities, those countries, those vulnerable populations have made minimal contribution to the climate problem over the years, and even currently today. At the same time, those communities, those countries, those marginalized groups have limited capacity to respond. So there is a differential responsibility. So in the debate, we have something we call common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacity in the light of national circumstances. It means then that the countries that have polluted, the polluter has to pay. And the countries that have put the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the countries that have benefited over the years, over the many years since the Industrial Revolution, should be called to pay and to compensate those countries who are now suffering the bulk of these issues.
So, Doc, let me just interject again. Here it is that you have 25 years going to these conferences, the various COPs, they used to call them something else before COP, and over that time, we have seen these major countries in these various conferences agree that they have to contribute a certain substance of money. They will pledge, but you never see the money materializing. And the issue is, from where you sit over this past 25 years looking at that and the impact on SIDS, do you believe that these conferences are getting us closer to dealing with the harsh realities that our small island development states are going to be facing and is facing?
My answer to the question is no. I don't believe. I think but we have to continuously be on the table. As the saying goes, if you're not on the table of the negotiation, you will be on the menu. Because you're looking through for food. So in other words, you got to be there to defend your position. So I would say we have gone circular way over many years, to a large extent. And a lot has to do with geopolitics. A lot has to do with finger pointing. The G2, the G1 and the G2 fighting each other. That is China and the United States, or the United States and China. The way you look at it. We see that they are fighting each other all the time. We have the G7 and the BRICS are fighting and pointing fingers at each other. And it has to do with the concept of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacity. Which means that all of us have a responsibility to address climate change. But some have a particular special role to pay for the damage that was done. And some have a particular role to be more ambitious in terms of the mitigation agenda and the adaptation agenda, and to make resources available, resources, financial resources, technical resources, technology and capacity building to the countries and the regions which are negatively impacted as a consequence. So that is a key issue. And the second issue is.
And Doc, what about funding for irreparable damages to the environment? There are some damages that will occur, like damage to our reefs and other things that may be irreversible. How do we get them to, and being tourist driven nations?
Yeah, the economy.
This is the concept of loss and damage that we are talking about. What is loss and damage is to a large extent that you could try to adapt as much as possible, but at a certain point, you will pass a certain threshold where you will have irreversible loss. You will not be able to adapt. And as a result, we need a special fund to take care of those instances. And those loss and damage could come because of slow onset events as well as rapid onset events. The slow onset events like ocean acidification, salination, loss of soil, and so on and so forth. And the rapid onset event is like the hurricane damage and so on. The question though what is the big elephant in the room is the concept of liability and compensation. This is what is the big bugbear in the whole negotiation. Just as we have the reparation for slavery, we have a similar situation where the developed countries are the countries which have put themselves in a position of taking advantage of the situation, are not prepared to make themselves liable to compensate those countries for the harm that they have done. Hence the reason why you have this a whole series of legal challenges taking place all over the world, challenging governments for not doing enough for climate change. Right now, I think we are waiting on a judgment from the ICJ and the CCJ with respect to these issues of climate change. So you will find that these countries want to defend a business as usual approach, keep the old status quo in place. Get damage, I will give you some money at the end of the damage, but I will not be able to pay for the damage that I have done in the past.
And prevention going forward as well, Byron?
Yeah, Doc, I just want to continue this, but I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about the suffering and the pain that our fellow nationals in Carriacou and Petite Martinique and the Grenadines are experiencing. Tonight, as we speak, they have no shelter. They're in the open elements. They're getting wet. They've lost everything. Seniors, how do they start over? In that situation, Doc, and I was listening to the executive secretary of the United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change. That is, of course, our own Simon Steele. And what he was saying that, look, the G20, he's saying that they're responsible for 80% of global emissions. That means what's contributing to climate change. But on top of that, they are, in terms of the GDP, 85% of the world GDP. That means he's saying that they have the wealth, they have the resources, and they are responsible. And yet, it is not happening. You talk about the loss and damage fund. I think, and you would recall at the last COP, it was only, $100 million US. I mean, chicken feed. But Doc, let's bring it down to our small island states. How can us, small island states, effectively collaborate and advocate for our needs on the global stage? What are we doing? What is your experience? Why it is not happening? What else could be done?
Well, I think the only way you could collaborate is working together as small island states and trying to forge alliances with others, including the least developed countries. Because in the convention itself and in several UN bodies and UN agreements, there is the concept of the special circumstances, unique vulnerability of small island states. And that needs to be protected. But what we see now is a big onslaught on this in the climate change debate. That people feel that we no longer special, and we no longer have our special circumstances, and we no longer are vulnerable than anybody else, which is being contested now, which is quite unfortunate. So one of the things that we have to be on the table of the negotiation is to defend that special circumstance. There is also on the table the issue of just transition. How do we transition away from a fossil fuel economy to a low carbon economy to ensure that no one is left behind? We need to be on the table also to ensure that. We need also to be on the table to ensure that we need to get resources for building resilience and for ensuring that we have enough money in the loss and damage fund, and also to have 1.5 degrees Celsius as the target limit with respect to mitigation. So we got to be on the table, and it's a constant fight. So my best bet is that we have to come together. We have done so as small island developing states, 39 to 43 countries, the way we want to count it. And then we need to add to this group the LDCs, and we need to use civil society and non-state actors, because they are very powerful actors out there. We need to join forces with them. That's the reason why we're seeing a lot of these legal challenges taking place now, and civil society, the youths, and so on in particular, are in the fight, and most times they are on the table with the small island developing states. So that is the best bet for us to join forces with like-minded groups like us and fight to ensure that our priorities are met in this debate.
But I want to look a bit at the political and economic barriers. So you've been, and I want to look at the last two, COP25 and COP26. Am I correct?
COP28.
28, and we're preparing now for 29. Yes.
Yeah.
But what in your view are the main? Having been there and an actor there, what in your view are the main political and economic barriers preventing this climate justice from being achieved? How do international power dynamics play out? What is your sense of it in these barriers?
Well, the biggest issue is the flow of dollars, the flow of funds. That's the biggest issue. And as it stands right now, we have net flows from developing to developed countries. Because why? When we have the damage from hurricanes, we borrow money. And the net effect of that borrowing is a movement of funds from the developing countries, the ones that have suffered the bulk of the pressure, to the developed. So it's a second area of injustice. Now you receive the damage as a result of the actions of the developed countries. They lend you the money and you have to pay for it and pay more for it and send it back to them. So you're getting the second level of injustice. That is the reality. That is the reason why many of the countries in the region, led in particular by Barbados, with this Bridgetown initiative, to look at the reform of the international financial infrastructure to ensure that these small countries have a better shake in terms of the flow of resources from the developed into the developing. This is, to me, the most important area to look at in the climate debate. The flow of funds is critical.
In other words,
when I say flow of,
sorry, when our GDP gets obliterated, as we did in Ivan, and as you say, we have to go to them to get assistance financially to build back the economics of the country. Here they are, instead of giving you grant funding, they're giving you loans. And that, and then we have to pay back, even though it's a concessionary financial things. And then the other thing that I think Prime Minister Mia Mottley addressed is how these funds are disbursed and the timeliness of it, because in disasters you need money quickly to help with recovery of livelihoods and lives. So, that is, and I see where the injustice is coming from there. But I want to ask this question to you, Doc. Are we in these islands have the capacity, and in particular, projects that we could say, we have 10 projects, 5 on mitigation, 5 on prevention, to deal with sea level rises, fisheries, or destruction of mangroves, reef protection, public health, agriculture. Are there projects that we as SIDS are coming to the table and says, listen, we have 10, 15 projects. They require $500 million in funds. Are you able to give and disperse for these, because we have specific areas that we have to develop? Are you seeing that coming forward as an actionable point in your discussions in the various groupings when possibly, the NGO community and these small islands, you said 30, 40 of them come together? Are these things that are being looked at? I know we have a lot of NGO groups in the COP, in the last one in particular. So are we seeing that? No?
Well, we do have a lot of projects. And the question is, and we have capacity on the national level and even the regional level, with 5Cs and other regional institutions, the University of the West Indies and SOMIs, and we have SECRE. We do have a lot of projects in the region. The question is facilitation access to the resources. If it takes 4 or 5 years to access the resources from the GCF and so on, that is where the issue comes in. And I think that is the reason why the Bridgetown Initiative and the various elements of the Bridgetown Initiative is quite topical at this point, because it's to remove those barriers of access and to make sure that these funds are grant-based financing. I think that is the key for us. But we have a responsibility, of course, as nations, to build the national capacity to ensure that we can develop those projects and have those projects ready for financing. That is a responsibility we have, and I think that's a responsibility which we have been shouldering over the years. The question is the delay and the frustration in getting those projects approved.
But
we
some
had
of-
one project.
Some of these developed countries might say to you, Doc, when you come that, these islands have a history of corruption, not transparent, they don't have the institutions to ensure the funds are properly directed and so on. What would be your response to that? Hence
Well,
the delay in getting it done.
What we have in the debate, in the negotiation, is what we call enhanced transparency framework, which creates the framework for the developed countries to be clear on where they're sending the money and to whom and for what. So they need to account at the same time, because the accounting is not only from our side, it's from both sides. That they need to say, well, look, this is the money, this is what it came from, and this is how the money will be spent. We then have a responsibility to track those funds and to make sure that they go towards the desired purpose. This is what we call the enhanced transparency framework within the convention, and that has been working pretty well with respect to developing countries. There is an excuse that is being made on this area, because what we found out is that it is quite easy for military spending of trillions and trillions of dollars, but it's very difficult for climate spending for 10% of that resources. And something has to be amiss here. Where is the political will to address one of the greatest problems facing us, as against the political will to finance
A war.
military conflict all over the globe?
Yeah.
And that is one of the issues that we, and the same military conflicts are the ones that pumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which again turns around and is damaging for us. Look at the sea surface temperatures in the region, which will energize burial. This is clearly as a result of climate change. The science is very clear on that. There is no dispute anymore. There is no hiding behind uncertainty in terms of science.
So, Doc, given this situation, your next meeting, COP29, is coming up in South America. I think is it Brazil?
No, in Baku.
Baku.
In
Okay, right.
we'll
Tell us a bit about the preparation. What is going to be the key issues there, or key priorities there, in achieving this climate justice, let's say in the next decade? What is your strategy going forward? I mean, because it seems year after year after year, we're getting nowhere, or very little progress. What is the strategy going forward to this next meeting?
Well, first, let me say that the priorities from the CARICOM countries, we have several priorities from CARICOM. One is to ensure that we keep the global temperature of 1.5 target within reach. That is a critical issue. That is the mitigation side. Two, that we have adaptation and we have funds allocated, grant resources allocated for adaptation. Three, that we have funds allocated for loss and damage. That's the three. The third. Then another critical issue is what we call just transition. That we leave no part of the economy, no part of the countries behind, and no country behind when we move to a fossil fuel-free economy. That the special circumstances of small island developing states need to be protected, and that funds, adequate resources, grant-based financing should be made available for adaptation and mitigation action in developing countries. And that must be prioritized for early seeds and seeds. This is our position. Now, the general situation in Baku, Azerbaijan, they will be focusing a lot on markets, Article 6, what we call it in our debate, the market mechanism. They will be focusing on what we call the NCQG, the new quantified qualitative goal on finance, which will replace the 100 billion goal that the developed country planned way back in Copenhagen in 2009. So that is where we are. But we need to make sure that those priorities that we have as CARICOM, as small island developing states, remain on the table in the negotiation to be significantly. And the outcome must be judged against the priorities of small island developing states and the most vulnerable among them.
You mentioned earlier about the role of NGOs and other civil society, but what actions can individuals and communities and civil societies, policymakers take to support climate justice? How can we get involved? How, as individuals, we can get involved? What action is possible? How do you see this?
Well, I mean, to a large extent, it has to be advocacy. I mean, on the part of civil society. I mean, they do that very well. The youths have been doing that. The Greta from Sweden and all that happening. If you recognize that there are a lot of legal challenges taking place across the globe, even in the Caribbean, we do have some of that. Juliana et al. In the US, there were 21 youths have taken the US government to court saying that we are not doing anything. But the question here is, what is the problem? And the problem will be the US itself, being the key decision maker a lot of times in the debate, understands with the new election coming up with Trump, we never know what will happen. He may just move away from the convention. He has moved away from the Paris Agreement. They went back. I think if he wins, he will move away from everything, and we will put the whole multilateral process in jeopardy. This is our feeling. He has not. The U.S. has never signed on to the Biodiversity Convention, which is a sister convention. And the only reason why is because there is a clause in there which says that there must be equitable benefits to people if you go and take the biodiversity material. If you go in the jungle of Africa or in
Guyana,
wherever, and you use the material, you have to get prior informed consent, and it must be on mutually agreed terms, and you must compensate the people for the genetic material. That clause alone was enough for the US not to sign on to that convention after all of these years. That clause, that same issue, goes across all of the U.S. positions in this matter. So that is an issue.
So Doc, for example, I'm planning to join a demonstration in Carriacou to protest climate justice. Make any sense? Any impact? Any effect on this? Should I go?
Well, I mean, they say the other guy used to have a car in Grenada. He said, what? And the back of it used to say, every drop counts. To a large extent, every drop counts. But I think we need to have action, not individual actions, but we need to have collective actions. We need to organize ourselves in a proper way and really make the case for the politicians to abide by our.
But Doc, I also want to highlight this fact that yes, we're getting climate change and probably the bigger effect here with sea level rises and acidification and loss of fisheries and all of that. But the US is also experiencing severe weather patterns, record-breaking heat waves, floods and all of these things, tornadoes that are super powerful. And yet still, we're not seeing them saying, boy, yes, we have a problem with climate change. Let us see how in a COP we could come and, as you say, speak about equity of distribution based on the kind of damages that we've seen and the ferocity of these things. So if they're not even taking care of their own self and recognizing to some degree what is happening, do you believe that they will give us the time of day to say, okay, in that 100 billion that we pledged, here is 20 billion, although I'm giving out 2 trillion for arms development, 20 billion for you guys. Do you believe that we will see that? I mean, probably you and I may not be alive. I just want to be positive. Do you think we're going to see it before you and I disappear?
My answer to the question is no. I mean, the Green Climate Fund, the replenishment of the Green Climate Fund, one of the countries that are doing the most at this point is the United States.
Look at that.
We wouldn't say it. And if you have Trump in office, we would call goodbye.
Yeah.
We would call goodbye this situation.
Scary.
So, I mean, it is quite scary. When we look at climate justice, we have some parameters. We do all the technical calculation, climate equity calculator. There is tools that use it. We look at the precautionary principle. We look at the sustainable development we look at growth, we look at means of implementation like dollars and so on. And then we come up with a matrix as to what will the climate equity calculator come up with. And I mean, it will show very badly for those countries. The G20.
Yeah, and the question is, I believe as we go forward, our young people are less patient than you and I and our generation. And if their sustenance, their life is threatened by these climate change events, the question is, are they going to accept this or stand by and watch it and not protest significantly across the world? Social media gives them a platform that they could demonstrate internationally if they need to.
Yeah.
And the question is that going to help move the needle? Do you think that can help, Doc?
I think so. I think coming together with civil society, as I mentioned earlier on, I think that we will have to look source for people with the same kinds of thinking, and there is value in numbers in terms of climate change.
As we look,
and to be quite honest with you, we have gone a long way. I mean, there were not many interest in climate change from outside of the negotiation for a long period, and now I think it is mainstream across all sectors. And what we notice now is that the people themselves, the fossil fuel lobby, is very strong now, and the only reason why is because they see the tide is moving against them. Because they didn't have to do anything before in the climate debate. They didn't even have to be there. They didn't have to give 1 ounce of energy to it. But these days, you will see that they are in the lobby groups and trying to influence what is happening outside because of the pressures that they are getting from civil society over there.
Doc, in our own environment, Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique, policy-wise, are we putting the right? Are we putting adequate resources on this issue in this category of our work? Are we giving it the attention it deserves fully, in your view? Being there.
Grenada has been a leader in this debate for a long while. I mean, we have tremendous efforts in this regard. A matter of fact, Grenada chaired the Alliance of Small Island States for 5 years, unprecedented. Most countries will be chairing the islands for 2 and maybe 3. We did for 5. That showed our commitment to the process as a country. And at the same time, we are involved in a lot of the decision-making forum with respect to climate change. Look, as you mentioned, Simon Steele, a former minister, is now the head of the Climate Change Secretariat. So it came as a result of our involvement in that space, and I think we need to be proud of what we have done over the years.
Doc, what message would you like to leave our viewers, listeners, regarding the importance of climate justice?
It's important to keep educating yourself on these matters, in my view, understanding what are the priorities for small island development states, what are the priorities for the CARICOM countries, what are the national priorities in climate change. It is important that we recognize that we need to ensure that we will not break the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius in mitigation, that we have build resilience in our economy, and I think that will be the critical issue. We have an opportunity now with Beryl in terms of building resilience as we go back, as you mentioned, build back better early on. I think this will be the critical. So there is opportunity in this crisis that we have right now. And I think we need to take advantage of the opportunity which this crisis has created in Grenada to build back better. I just look at, I had someone mentioned to me recently that have you ever seen a telephone pole within the context of the signal city? I said, no. He said, right, that's it. How many acres of land do they have in SGO? But there is no pole out there. Everything is underground. All the infrastructure is underground. The telephone, the communication, the electricity, everything is underground. And they have their own generating capacity, a mini grid, basically. And this is the kind of thing that we need to do.
The Bermuda model.
Yeah. Concrete roof.
Yeah. We need to, and I think I got some pronouncement from the policymakers in this regard, which I think was quite useful. we need to build resilience in the economy.
Yeah.
And all of us have to be part of that, including community groups, be part of that. And I think it goes back to education. We need to get the youths on board, get the youth involved, and create that groundswell of activities which will move the needle in the right direction. And of course, we need to take a holistic view. We must not only look at the environmental impact, the economic impact, the social impact, the psychosocial impact, the cultural impact. We have to take an entire comprehensive view of the development going forward.
Doc, I want to thank you very much for being part of the program this evening. I think we learned a lot. But I also have a concern about succession planning. When your current team, you've been there for 25 years, you have a lot of experience and I suspect respect out there in the international community on your views and what you present. Simon Steele have just come on the scene, but are we seeing a succession planning develop on the foreign policy side, dealing with climate change going forward, that, you know, could continue seeing our small island Grenada being such an influencer? And I hope that that is something that the policymakers are looking at.
I think you're right, and don't forget that over the years that we have developed a lot of potential. We do have a lot of Grenadians, young Grenadians that are in high places in the international community now as we speak. Not only Simon Steele, we're talking about young people who have just come from school, who came into the process and have been taken up by international organizations across, and we continue to do that. We may not be able to retain as many as them because of the structures of our economy and so on, and like people get opportunities out there. But we have to continuously build the capacity as we go forward to ensure that we have a cadre of people. And over the last 2 COPs, we had many young persons accompanying to take over as we move forward. And I think that is a very good example that the ministry has embarked on over the last period.
Excellent.
Would we be able, Doc, that's my final, would we be able, bottom line, given burial damage, particularly in the north of the island, but particularly Carriacou and Petite Martinique, would Grenada be able to access the loss and damage fund that was agreed at the last COP meeting?
Answer, no.
No.
Because no, that fund will not be able to be ready, in my view, to give anybody any money for a long time. We have about $800 million in that fund, which is pocket change. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, what is been happening now, that the board is meeting now to put all the systems and structures in place so that people could ground whatever money. And that will take, in my view, a number of years. Ever happen.
No.
And I mean, because we never agree on anything in that process anytime quickly. So to agree on who and how, the access modalities and so on will take a lot of debate. It will take maybe 2 or 3 COPs before we could ever believe that any money will come out of this, in my view. So I'm thinking that this money is available now. I don't think it's true.
And by that time, the 800 million will need to become a trillion.
Yeah, don't apply, in other words, you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense at this point. I mean, I think we have to go the route of the reform of the international financial system, the route of ensuring that we advocate for climate justice, and that we use whatever monies that we have to the effect of building the resilience and demonstrate that we're using the resources to demonstrate. It's easy to give some money, and that is what the committee. There is a difference between disaster risk reduction and climate change. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Because disaster is a humanitarian aspect. You give out the generosity of your heart.
Yeah.
For climate, an obligation as a result of you pollute the environment. And we heard what came out of the UNCLOS, the recent decision from UNCLOS, which says that greenhouse gas emissions in the environment, in the marine environment, is pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And states have a moral duty and an obligation to ensure that they do not pollute the marine environment. This came out of UNCLOS quite recently. And we expect the same to come out of the ICJ and other legal challenges that we have. We expect the same kind of response, that states have a responsibility and an obligation to address climate change, which is not the same as a humanitarian response to a disaster.
Doc, that's all the time we have. I want to thank you on behalf of MTV. I think the region, Grenada, is very fortunate to have someone of your caliber at this stage of our development, particularly as a negotiator at the international level. Again, we want to thank you for being with us this evening and wish you much success in your ongoing professional work, Doc.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Viewers,
Good night, everyone.
that's all the time we have.